This week, Lynn Dohm from Women in Cybersecurity is with us to discuss why the growth of women in cyber has slowed. Then we've got a two-part news segment this week. In the first segment, we'll discuss all things AI, not because we want to, but because the news cycle is absolutely consumed with it. My mom's asking me about it, which means some of your moms are probably asking you about it. It's a mess, but we'll provide some useful insights. Then our final news segment will be more traditional, covering stuff like funding and acquisitions, understanding the SEMGREP license drama, ridiculous vulnerabilities everywhere, vulns to take down your city's cell services, vulns to mess with your Subarus, vulns in Microsoft 365 authentication, and cybersecurity regulations are apparently worthless, and Facebook is banning people for mentioning Linux, vigilantes on GitHub. It's a mess. All that and more in this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1password. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Croissant Day. This is episode 392, recorded on Thursday, January 30th, 2025. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me today is the Admiral of ASPM, the Captain of Content, Katie Teitler-Santullo. How are you, Katie?
I am well, although my calendar says it is National Hot Tea and Croissant Day, so I have hot tea.
Oh, nice. There's like 20 of them. Yeah. On any given day. There's so many international, national, silly marketing days. Also joining us is the Dean of Data Science, the Knight of Neurodiversity, the Watcher of Data Center Waste, Jackie McGuire. How you doing, Jackie?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I spent some time working on that. You can give me notes later. I don't know if you like any of that or don't like it, but I try and come up with something fun.
It sounds like you saw my my little LinkedIn exchanges.
Yeah, that was one of the sources of inspiration. Yeah.
Yeah.
He also loves alliteration, so there's that.
I appreciate that. I occasionally am guilty of the same.
All right, quick announcement. We'd love to remind you to give us some feedback if you enjoy this podcast. Subscribe, like, and comment if the platform you're on supports those things. Tell us how we could do better or guests you'd like to see on the show. And for today's first interview, or actually our only interview today, the topic is women in cybersecurity. We're excited to have Lynn Dohm, the Executive Director of Women in Cybersecurity, or WESIS, with us today. Welcome, Lynn.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me today. And I don't have my tea and I don't have my croissant, but now I know what I'm going to be going after right after this podcast.
It's always good to have a mission. Yeah.
Yes. That could be dinner. That could be dinner tonight, is hot tea and a croissant.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing.
And that is it's a good pairing. I don't know about for dinner, but it's definitely a good pairing. I could go for a hot tea and croissant, but I've settled for a shot of espresso here and a glass of water for the podcast. Nobody wants to see me eat on the podcast.
I prefer croissant French toast. We always get those big things of croissants from Costco, and my kids never eat all of them. So if you cut them into slices, you can make French toast with them, and it's amazing.
That does sound amazing.
Mom tip.
So let's get into this. Lynn, just a little background. I've kind of followed the community for a while. I did a B-Sides Las Vegas talk in 2015 called Why Does InfoSec Play Bass? It just came out of some insights I had noticed I'd gotten on Twitter. Just started noticing there's so many bass players. And I thought, what else can I find out about InfoSec and the people who work in InfoSec. And I remember back then, this was 2015. And it wasn't the most scientific way that you probably could have done it, but I came up with 8% women in cybersecurity, and that seemed to shoot up really fast, which made me very interested in doing this interview and understanding, what kind of fueled that growth and what's going on with that, because it looks like a report that you released last year says maybe it's starting to slow some.
Yeah. So, actually, the WISIS organization was founded just as a conference in 2014, because at that time we referenced the ISC2 workforce study, and it showcased that women represented 11% of the cybersecurity workforce at that time. And so our founder, Dr. Ambereen Siraj, that was at Tennessee Tech University at that time, she reached out and started a conference from some seed funding, considering if 11% of women in the cybersecurity workforce existed, which she wasn't seeing in any of her circles of industry, academia, or government, let's bring them together for a technical conference so that we could collectively learn and grow and network and see one another. You were in this space in 2015, and you know that women weren't very well seen or represented in the workforce. And so that really got the ball rolling and the initiative started. And in 2018, ISC2 reported again that women were still at that 11% of the workforce. And that's when a board was formed, and the WISIS conference turned into a WISIS nonprofit 501c3 organization with the mission to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity. So in 2019, we were happy to see that it did bump up into 20 to 24% roughly in the workforce, depending on what studies you're reading. And that number remains stagnant at this time, but we're hopeful we'll continue to keep that number going strong moving forward. But the purpose of our organization is to create accessibility and opportunities for women not only to get into cybersecurity, but also advance in their careers because of it. And because our mission is to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity, is that life cycle, no matter where you're at in the career. So we're always looking at what does the future hold for us? How are we supporting mid-career individuals for those more senior positions? And then always cycling into also creating that accessibility for more individuals to come into the workforce and building out that pipeline too. I mean, we exist because we're at a critical workforce shortage. And so we need to keep that momentum going strong and continue to invest in the most valuable and expensive asset, and that's its people in the cybersecurity workforce.
For
So
sure.
that's where we're at as an organization. And it's been within our organization, we've been seeing the growth, and we have seen it reflected in the community efforts as well.
So let's zoom in on that pipeline a little bit, because one of my general concerns about cybersecurity is that one of the key, what we perceive as an entryway into the industry, is one of the worst jobs you could possibly have in the industry. And I wonder if SOC analyst doesn't run some people off. And of course, there's other factors that could possibly run women off from our industry. We've seen it in IT as well. On the culture side of things, are you concerned that part of the reason it's stagnant is not because the influx is going down, but people are leaving as quickly as they're coming in? And do you think the jobs we have available as entry level or junior jobs is potentially part of the problem as well?
So that is a really good question. Is that something that we've been looking at ourselves? Because we have that retention and advancement as part of our mission, we also want to know, what is this attrition? We could recruit all we want, but if we can't retain
Right.
women in the workforce, what does that look like? So we spent the later half of 2023 and 2024 really focusing on what is the state of inclusion for women in cybersecurity. And that gave us a benchmark report on identifying and getting a better viewpoint of what is retention. And it's called the State of Inclusion Benchmark Report for Women in Cybersecurity. It was important for us to have that information so that we could actually quantify the experiences of exclusion to identify the state of inclusion for women in cybersecurity, give us an overarching view as what is that retention, what does it look like, what are the pain points, and if women are leaving the workforce, how could we as a nonprofit help intentionally bridge that gap? But also by quantifying it and having this actual data now, we're able to open the doors and have the conversations of what is industry also doing in order to being able to retain their talented individuals. And so that was really an important initiative of ours. And we produced that report at the beginning of 2024. And there were things that we weren't surprised about, and there were things that we were surprised about. And, what it boils down to is what we've discovered is women are at that glass ceiling at around 6 to 10 years within their career. And their second highest area of exclusion comes from the lack of career growth and advancement opportunities. And by partnering with Illyria Research, this second highest area of exclusion, the first highest area of exclusion is respect. That's men, women, that's all industries. We weren't surprised by that data point. But the second one being the lack of career growth and advancement was something we were very interested in because Illyria hasn't seen that in any other industry other than looking at women in cybersecurity. So that aligns with that 6 to 10 years, the lack of career growth and advancement opportunities, and that being a contributing factor to that. I mean, there's many different contributing factors, but at least we're able to narrow down to those more higher areas of exclusion.
So I remember when you and I spoke about maybe a year and a half ago, the previous report had just come out, and you were speaking about it at an event where I was as well. And I remember hearing that 6% statistic and thinking, oh, geez, okay. Or the 6-year statistic that women start to phase out or opt out after 6 years, and thinking, I can understand that, but I have my point of view. So can you talk a little bit more about some of the reasons that women are either opting or phasing out, and why that number, now we're sort of at a 6 to 10 range, which feels like you're hinting at it's getting worse?
Well, so some of the contributing factors, especially when it comes to the lack of career growth and advancement opportunities, is that when you see your colleagues when you're getting passed up for promotions, when you're kind of getting put into the status quo bucket of when you're not really necessarily getting the stretch assignments that you're seeking for or that you're going for, when you're asking your direct manager questions about your career growth, like their interest in your career growth and advancement in the field is a little bit diminished. And so what we've discovered is that, quite frankly, people get bored. And when you get bored, you're either stepping out of that corporation or you're stepping out of the career altogether. And so we're seeing that is a contributing factor, is not having those really strong advancement opportunities or the interest even in the advancement opportunities coming forward. But Katie, when we met, we were first circulating this data, and it was very new information when we first met a year and a half ago. And since then, I've been all over the place, having many different conversations about the data that we found. But we were asked the questions, if there's this 6 to 10 years glass ceiling, could it be a performance issue? And so that's what led us to partner with N2K. Now, N2K is News to Knowledge, and they do a hard skills assessment on a cybersecurity practitioner level. And they were able to do an assessment in alignment with the WESIS organization. And we're really pleased to report that WESIS members are out there killing it as cybersecurity practitioners. They are outperforming all other participants of the N2K hard skills assessment. According to all 7 NICE categories, they outperformed all other participants, and they've outperformed all other participants in the 17 out of the 20 specialty areas as well. So what we did with that data is we were able to look out of the specialty areas, those 3 areas where they didn't outperform. We were very intentional about building programs in that area, and our program director put that information to good use. But we were also interested in seeing that those that self-identified in more junior roles were performing in actually more mid to senior capabilities. So there was a really interesting storyline that's a really interesting story that the data is now showing us. Now we have better insight to look into how are we going to explore this further, because we have that 6 to 10 years glass ceiling. We have the lack of career growth and advancement opportunities, the second highest area of exclusion. We have, then women our WESIS members are outperforming all other participants on the hard skills cybersecurity practitioner levels, but they're identified in more junior roles, but performing at more mid to senior capabilities. So how could we close that gap, especially when we're looking at skills-based advancement and those that are qualified for those advancement in the field? When we're looking at those opportunities, where are we going to explore further with that?
So I think Harvard Business Review kind of has a sort of more performance-oriented study. And I think, do you think some of it has to do with the fact that women are significantly less likely to self-promote? So even if they're functioning at a higher level than what they're, where they're at, and they have great skills, come review time, if you're more hesitant to really promote the work that you've done and seek out recognition from other people, it can sometimes. So I know in my career previously, that's been a really difficult thing, because I think, I grew up before social media, and being a self-promoter was a really bad thing, where all the mediocre dudes around me were more than happy to tell you how awesome they were and how much of my work they had to do with. So, I'm wondering if there's also kind of a gap there with the whole confidence and the, recording and quantifying your results, because that, I know for me, that was definitely a barrier early in my career, is I was afraid to brag too much.
Yeah, I mean, those could be contributing factors for sure. And we do have a very solid mentor-mentee program. We have 1,600 enrolled in our mentor-mentee program, where we have a very distinct curriculum. And that is part like your presentation, your branding, how you have to step into the uncomfortable and you really, advocate for yourself. No one's going to advocate for you harder than yourself. Unless, of course, you have a sponsor that's up there and he and she will speak to you when you're not even in the room advocating for you. That's always really important. But those are definitely skill sets that come with growth and experience. Through our mentor-mentee program, we're introducing those topics and those conversations and mentoring other individuals through it. But I'm sure there is contributing factors. I mean, we all know the data that men could look at a job rec and, be like, all right. I could. They like perceive their ability to be able to perform based on, their ability to be like, I could do that. And on their future performance, where women are a little more critical on, are we experts on each and every single area before we're going to make the go ahead of moving forward like that. So it is us being, perhaps in some instances, women being very cautious or more self-aware in that areas. And, for us, it's about educating on the benefits of being able to self-promote and to be able to acknowledge your own recognition and your own accomplishments in a way where others are acknowledging them as well, especially in the very important instances of career growth.
Now, in the past, you've spoke about mentorship, and you've spoken about the idea of creating a community and groups and people who are encouraging around you. What are some of the other ways that either young women getting into the field or women who are mid or senior level can really get that support, or tools, tricks, tips, behaviors that they can practice, friendships and colleagueships that they can form? What are some of the best ways that you and WESIS have seen to be able to do that? Because it's not just as easy as saying, I'm going to start being a self-promoter. It's not, because for some of us, as Jackie mentioned, it's sort of ingrained to be a little bit more demure and a little bit more, self-deprecating, perhaps.
Right. When it comes to WESIS, in 2018 was the first time that I attended my first WESIS conference. And throughout my entire career, I was always looking for that community and that camaraderie. And it was right in front of me the whole entire time with the WESIS. And I was working with the WESIS organization behind the scenes for a few years at that point. But by the time I went to the conference in 2018, when I sat down at that table for the keynote banquet at the breakfast or the lunch there, it was the first time in my career where I was surrounded by this incredible camaraderie and this network. And I thought, one, it was right in front of me the whole time. You don't know really what you're missing until it's right in front of you. And then two, my career grew very advanced very quickly from that moment, from the community that was there, the momentum, the opportunities that existed from those conversations. And that's something that women in cybersecurity don't necessarily always have access to, especially when they're working in more siloed positions where they don't necessarily have the representation around them. And it's very crucial and it's very important. So it's about meeting your community and how do you do that? And so WESIS, our organizations and many other organizations offer many opportunities about meeting your community and finding your network and having that camaraderie. And you'll see within our organizations, we have so many different areas. Like, for example, our mentor-mentee program, we put it in a cohort program intentionally. We did that very intentionally because, one, we're training the mentor to mentor others. It's like the mentor program. We're giving the mentor curriculum. We're putting them in a cohort of individuals that are just below them in their career so that the experience is very fresh on their career growth advancement. And then we're encouraging them to mentor the programming efforts based on the curriculum right there. Because in all of our research, it shows that you're more likely to advance in your career when you're a mentee. When you have a mentor, you're 5 times more likely to advance in your career. But in the research that we came across as well, it was really interesting for us to discover that you're 6 times more likely to advance in your career if you are a mentor. So we thought, let's utilize this programming efforts that's building the leadership skill set and mentoring the mentor and then putting them in the cohort. Then the cohort has their colleagues, their peers, their network. Like my first cohort in 2020, we're in a text thread. We exchange ideas and recipes and, drinking tea and complaining about things. We do it all at this very same day. I mean, we're always constantly together. We keep our thumb on the pulse of the news and we have these conversations. I mean, these cohorts are intended for that community effort to be built.
And did you
And
say
that's
you
how
have
we built our program.
1,600 people enrolled?
Enrolled in, yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
We do it as a 9-month curriculum, a 9-month program. It originally was a year in 2020. And then we realized pretty much everyone checks out in the summer. Like even the mentors want to check out in the summer a little bit. So we need to not be so intense with our programming efforts. So we do a 9-month program. We open up registration or applications for the program 1 time a year. And every single year we continue to enhance our curriculum depending on what's necessary. Our curriculum from 2020 is vastly different than the curriculum now. And it's incredible. It's a powerful program. I'm a mentor in it every year. These individuals are just to get in the meeting alone with 4 other individuals that, are my mentees, but really they're mentoring me too. I mean, we're all in this together. We're all looking to achieve results in our livelihoods and in our careers. And so that's
You
just
learn a
kind of
lot
the
about
program.
yourself when you teach other people, especially when they bring problems to you and you're like, oh, let me tell you about a time I screwed that up and how I would do it differently if I had it to do over again. Like I find that with people I mentor that I just as much I'm talking about all the ways that things have gone wrong for me and how I wished I had handled situations as much as, my current successes. I mean, they're just things that if you haven't been there, it's so hard to understand. But yeah, I think that reflecting on my failures while explaining what I would have done differently to other people, I've learned so much more about myself. And I think I make better decisions going forward now.
Yeah, it's always a learning lesson. The actual program itself was built in 2020 based on a program we had in 2019 that wasn't successful. So that is, we took the lessons and we're like, well, this isn't working. We really thought we were going to match a mentor and a mentee and they were going to skip off in the sunset and have incredible career growth and advancement. We were going to all pat ourselves on the back and say, job well done. But that wasn't the case with our mentoring program. We realized that it needs a lot more hand holding. It needed a lot more structure. We needed to bridge the gap so relationships are built quicker and faster. And we found that this effort and the way that we built it out just seems to be working. And so, but that's right. It's always like all the lessons learned we have in life, right, Jack? Always, even to this day, even for this week of all weeks. Yes, we've all had many moments where of reflection. You're like, okay,
Yeah. Now I type a lot of messages that never get sent. I used to send a lot of messages. Now I type messages and I'm like,
you take that moment and think, how's this gonna? Yeah.
One of my friends introduced me to Polite Post, which I use all the time now. I take whatever I'm thinking, I dump it into Polite Post, and it goes way over the top in terms of, how you should approach a conversation or an email or whatever but it at least gives me that moment of pause. So
is this a tool?
Yeah.
Polite Post?
Okay. Polite Post.
I haven't heard of this.
It's like politepost.net or something. So yeah, check it out.
Oh.
I'm thankful that Slack implemented Control Z, because I do some Control Z a lot in Slack.
One thing I want to ask you, I don't know how much time we have left, Lynn, but when we last talked, one of the things that you were very big on was inclusion. And I think it was just because of, at that point, there was so much good data that you got about the state of inclusion. And we were discussing how women can be excluded in very subtle ways, perhaps. And you told me, and you told the group actually during your talk, about how you can position things when you are an observer to somebody being excluded. Could you talk a little bit about that and how, if you're on the other side, if you're a party to witness this, if you're in a room where not just women, but anybody might be actively being excluded, what are some of the easier tips and tricks that people can take, not to upset anybody, not to, stoke a fire, but how to start to subtly and thought-provokingly change what's going on?
Yes. Oh, you've got a really good memory, Katie. Yes.
Well, these things, they made an impression on me. So yeah, of course I remember them.
Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. And so that presentation, we were summarizing that presentation. It was all about paying attention, the importance of paying attention. And one of my favorite ways of just showcasing about paying attention is there's some simple tools that individuals could be doing. Is just kicking back and being observant. And if you notice some behavior, allyship is a leadership skill set. And we also know that allies get very uncomfortable too. It's not easy to be an ally. It's not easy sometimes to speak up, but we also recognize, it's not easy in certain scenarios where you feel like maybe your job is going to be in jeopardy if you speak up at that very moment. But there are subtle ways, if you recognize that someone intentionally or continuously is being interrupted, it's being like interrupt the interrupters and saying something like, okay, so-and-so, that is really great, but I want to finish in hearing what so-and-so is saying right now. Or acknowledging, we've all been a part of scenarios. I mean, we've been in our careers for quite some time now. And each and every one of us, men, women, everyone, has been involved in a scenario where someone else is taking recognition for the good work you're doing and drawing it back to the original contributor, the original owner of that work, not in a very harmful way, but just in an acknowledging and a respectful way. Those are all things that really showcase your allyship. And it really does change the dynamic of the culture. It's all about building up the culture and the culture of high performers, the culture of trust, the culture of innovation and creativity, where growth and good business decisions are being made. And part of that is just making sure it's a safe and trusted space. So if it takes an individual to speak up, and it's a muscle that can be learned, it's a skill set that can be learned, and we have resources on our website that are very valuable tools there. but to be able to start utilizing those muscles, to be like, oh, okay, if you read a resource that really resonates with you, you could have that aha moment like, all right, next week, I know I'm going to be in this meeting and I know it's going to get a little heated. And because we have the same people that come into the meeting that tend to heat things up. And I'm going to be very mindful to make sure that everyone has, that if I notice something, that I redirect it in a way that's of positive light to share the space with others. So those are just some of the things. But interrupting the interrupters is always something that plays in my head, because I've had so many experiences where I've observed that behavior myself throughout my entire career. So, and you'll never forget an individual, an ally, man, woman, allies, advocates, you'll never forget the individual that interrupts the interrupter and kind of draws back attention to the point of the conversation at hand. You'll never forget that person. They showed up to you in a very small but an extremely impactful way. I mean, Jackie and Katie, you're both nodding your head. Adrian, you're nodding your head. Like, this is, all of us have had those moments in the career where you're like, aha, that person saw what I just saw. And,
it's really satisfying to interrupt interrupters too. So
I'm sorry, did you just say what I think you said?
Or my favorite thing is when a man repeats something a woman just said, and you're like, yeah, I think that's exactly the point that the woman was making that you just restated, and all the men in the room were like,
Yes.
I was, and Adrian and I were talking about, is the DEI initiatives going away going to make things more difficult? I think yes, but also I think maybe we all are going to start looking for more ways in that we can directly have an impact as individuals. I'm a writer, so there's a huge kind of underground group of women writers who all help each other, who all share work and opportunities. And I think we're able to do that in security as well. So I hope this is kind of an inflection point for women to say, we have to take some of this on ourselves, and we have to recruit as many men as we can to also help with the effort, because, at the end of the day, we're still the ones who are hiring people or not hiring people.
Yeah.
And that's what's unique about the WSIS organization, that we're not a women's only organization. We're a community of women and men and allies and advocates that are all coming together because we're at this critical workforce shortage. So, these conversations are important because the problem isn't going away. We're at a critical workforce shortage. Cybersecurity issues are still existing. And we just so happen to be investing in the most valuable and expensive asset of the workforce, and that's its people. And so, the work still needs to be done. And, it's definitely a moment where there's a power of a pause, of taking a moment of reflection and, trying to level set the conversation and moving forward with really strong purpose and vision and, having strong values there.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to wrap up here, and urge our listeners to take a pause and go check out the show notes. And we've got some good links in there. We've got a link to the State of Inclusion benchmark, the 2024 Cyber Talent Study, and also to WSIS programs. So check those out. And Lynn, thank you so much for joining us today. This is great.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lovely conversation. Really appreciate it.
All right, stay tuned. When we come back, we've got 2 new segments for you, and the first one is all AI. That way, if you're all AI'd out, you can skip it, or if you somehow completely missed the last week of news, we'll get you caught up.